50 years ago, you go outside and pretty much everyone looks like this. And nowadays, you go to the mall, you go to a Walmart, and it looks like every other person that you see is fat. Why is this? Now, we're having an epidemic throughout the whole world where people are moving less and they're eating more. That's the simple solution to all of this. So this question arises, why are people eating more if they're moving less? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't not as much energy be used, so you should just be full and things should work out all right, even if they're docile? Unfortunately, that's not the case. And that's because of carbs. I'm going to be honest with you guys. These food companies like Coca-Cola, they've basically got 3D models of tongues, and they can manipulate our taste buds to make their product as pleasurable as possible. This isn't the food company's faults. They're driven by a capitalist society where they want to make as much money as possible. Therefore, they make their product as good as possible. And in this case, Coca-Cola is drinking drank Coca-Cola is drank for pleasure, and their job is to make it as pleasurable as possible. So that's what they do. But in turn, Coca-Cola is now one of the most addictive things on the planet. And that's because of sugar. Specifically these fizzy beverages like sodas, Mountain Dew, even some fruit juices are just loaded with so much sugar because that's what people love. We crave this for some reason. So, sugar is obviously very addictive. Everyone who's had a soda knows that you have to drink two more after you have the first one, and suddenly you've went 3 times over your daily value for sugar. And then you start to crave more and more sugar. You get what's called a sweet tooth, and it seems like the cycle never ends. This doesn't happen with something like fat or protein. You eat 1,000 calories of ground beef, you're done, you're full. But for some reason, with carbohydrates, this happens. Now, I don't mean to demonize carbohydrates. There's definitely pros to them. First off, they're extremely cheap. You get for $2 a 32-ounce bag of rice. That's 4 cups of rice. That's 2,400 calories. That's a steal. You can get a whole bunch of bananas for like $3. So carbs are extremely cheap compared to fat and protein sources. 1,000 calories of ground beef is like $8. So in that case, where you're going from a budget perspective, carbs are going to be cheaper. So that's a plus. And also, the data shows that whenever you're exercising, whenever you're working out, for our athletes watching this video, carbohydrates are just superior in every way compared to fat as the other energy source. Now, whenever you're on a carnivore diet or a keto diet where you cut out all carbs, your body goes into something called ketosis, where essentially it processes fat better and everything eats something called ketones instead of sugar. Now, these ketones are very good for something like brain performance or exercise or long distance exercise, such as a cross country runner or a marathon runner. Those endurance exercises are perfect for ketones because they're slow burning. But in something like a football player, like a boxer, like a sprinter, ketones are awful because your body needs glycogen in order to be explosive. And that is only produced through glucose, through sugar, through carbs. So when you're in these situations where you need to be explosive, you can't because your body's running off of ketones, these slow burning things. Your energy source can't keep up with the demands that your body's putting on, and then things start to become problematic. So carbohydrates scientifically are way better for working out, and then post-workout as well. Once your muscles are depleted of this glycogen, you hit what's called an anabolic window where your body's trying to rebuild itself. So you're wanting to eat carbs within 2 to 3 hours after you work out, along with protein, so that your muscle gets built up. If you're a bodybuilder, you want your muscles to get bigger. If you're an athlete, you want to get more and more explosive so that you can outcompete the other guy. Carbs are just superior than fat in all of these cases. Now, the only thing that ketones can really be superior in is brain function. I took a nutrition class, and the thing that my teacher said was that your brain needs carbs, so ketosis really makes no sense. But new data is showing that your brain can eat ketones, and it functions really well on ketones. I tried carnivore for a month. My brain was functioning at such a high level. I think that there's a way to get around this personally, but that's not the point of the video. Carbs definitely have their place, and because they're so cheap, I think it's reasonable to want to fight for carbs. So the question is, what carbs are bad and what carbs are good? Now, I think a big part of this is something called the glycemic index of a carb, how quick the sugar hits once it's inside of your system. Something like rice is very close to glucose, with glucose being 100, rice is at like a 93 glycemic index. So you eat something like white rice and it breaks down to mostly sugar, and you get a very quick sugar hit. This is very good for during exercise. Maybe you're in a rest set and you eat a spoonful of rice. That would, in theory, be very good for your performance because that's giving you energy. And post exercise, this is also very good because this can help your muscles restore what they have burnt. And this is very good if you're working out twice a day. Maybe you're in some sort of a sport and you want to do strength training along with your sport. Consuming these carbs is going to be very powerful for that. These high glycemic index carbs. And then there's carbs with lower glycemic indexes. This is your whole foods, like a whole grain toast or a berry or some brown rice, which is rice with the bran on the outside. And this is going to be slower digested, but it's also not going to raise your blood sugar as quickly. So they've each got their own benefits. If you want a slow acting carb for a endurance exercise, then carbs with a lower glycemic index may be better. But if you're an explosive athlete, maybe you want these high glycemic index carbs. So if you're anything like me, right now you're thinking, I'll just eat the high glycemic index carbs all the time. That seems awesome. The problem is you eat these and they spike your blood sugar really fast and insulin reacts. So the signal that puts this blood in your sugar, in your muscles, in your fat cells to store it for energy spikes. And then since we eat so many of these carbs, it tends to spike a little more than it needs to. So these carbs get digested really quickly. They get put into your body great. But this insulin is still there, and this insulin starts to drop, and then you start to crave more carbohydrates. And since we eat so much sugar nowadays, a third of every teens is now pre-diabetic, which is a huge problem because your body sees the insulin signal and it starts to ignore it. And then you're just going to crave even more carbs. So it's this never-ending cycle. That's why you can see a kid who's 200 pounds eat a cookie. I want another cookie. I want another cookie. They're eating 6 cookies every single day, and they're not even really becoming so hyper because of it. Usually you feed a kid sugar, they're going to bounce off the walls. You feed an adult sugar, they're probably going to bounce off the walls if they're a healthy individual. But your body starts to suppress this because it's starting to ignore insulin. And then you're just never going to feel full after eating carbs. So these lower glycemic index carbs are very good maybe in between workouts, in between some sort of a movement. Maybe at lunchtime, you plan on working out at 6. It would be a better idea to eat these lower glycemic index carbs if you're not in that unique circumstance of directly before or directly after a workout. And this is in turn going to make you less hungry. The reason they have a lower glycemic index is because they have other things like fiber. This fiber is going to make you feel full. It's like whenever you eat an apple, the outside of an apple is going to help fill up your stomach, and you're going to feel more full. So this is definitely an important thing to consider, and I want to call a lot of you out. If you're a docile person, if you don't work out 6 times a week, if you don't work out at all, I would like to ask you, why are you even eating carbs? Because your brain still functions on a full fat diet. Why not just eat fat and protein, other than the fact that carbs are addictive? Ideally, get rid of all the carbs if you're not going to be working out, if you're going to be sitting down all day. I think that's a terrible life to live, but if you're just going to be playing Fortnite all day, then there is zero reason for you to be eating rice, beans, bread. You should just cut that all out realistically, because you're not emptying those glycogen stores, and then your body's just going to keep storing for potential exercise, and you're just going to become fat. But if you're eating protein and fats, then your body's probably just going to eat enough to maintain its normal things, and you'll be a lot less likely to lead to overeating. So this is why eating a lot of carbs can lead to overeating, because the combination of just carbs being addictive by nature and this insulin resistance problem that we're having, I'd suspect that everyone sort of has a little problem with this, just because of how our diet has become. When I was growing up, I would eat a full box of Cheez-Its with no remorse, and that's definitely had its effects on me and my health of my gut. If you overeat fructose, that's going to negatively impact your health, your gut health, your microbiome. So our bodies weren't necessarily made to process a lot of fructose. Fructose is the type of sugar that comes from fruit, which is great. You eat fruit. Typically, you don't get too much sugar just from eating fruit. Typically, the sugars in fruit are pretty healthy, and it's fine to eat fruit. But the sugar that is table sugar is half fructose and half glucose. And there's another ingredient in all of your granola bars and cereals. That's the first ingredient, so it's the most prevalent, called high fructose corn syrup. This has a lot of fructose in it as well. So the combination of eating 55 grams of added sugar in a Mountain Dew, or eating the fructose and high fructose corn syrup, God knows how much fructose is in that. Your body is taking in a lot of fructose, and it can't process it all. Your liver tends to rapidly turn fructose into fat. So you start to get fat around your liver. That's also going to make you hungrier. And also, this extra fructose that doesn't get converted into glucose gets eaten by bacteria in the large intestine. And then you start to have these overgrowths of bad bacteria in your gut, which is going to further make you crave sugar, because these bacteria are going to want fed, and it's going to further your sugar addiction. So I don't wish to demonize. Let me start that over. I don't wish to demonize carbs, because there are so many good things that can come from carbs. If you're broke, I would honestly understand you saying, I need to be eating a lot of carbs just so that I can still pay to live. But I would like to argue that if you're 12, 13 years old and you think you're broke, you're likely not. If you're eating out 2-3 times a week, a little actionable step for the teenagers: calculate how much whatever your family got costed, and figure out your share. Say you're in a family of 4, divide whatever that price is by 4, and have a conversation with your parents. Tell them, I'm trying to become more dedicated to my health. I've calculated how much I usually cost eating out. Would it be possible for me to use this in groceries? And buy yourself a pound of organic ground beef and 4 cups of brown rice. And that's 3,200 calories. So that's about 3 meals if you really divvy that up. And that's going to be way better than eating out. Ideally, you take half a pound of ground beef and a cup of that rice. Honestly, a half cup of that rice. That's 8 servings of rice for $2. If your parents like to make you eat out, and that's always high carbohydrates, high seed oils. I haven't talked about seed oils in this video, but those are problematic too. If that's a reality for you, I know I've said in previous videos it's a value of mine, eat and be grateful for whatever your parents provide for you, but I think that only applies to if they actually make the meal. If they're just picking up a meal made by some worker, it might be more productive for you to have that conversation and tell them, I want to start to make my own meals on those nights that we eat out. I understand that we may be kind of poor, but I think that I can make use of this money, and then propose a little budget. Maybe go to the grocery store with your parents. Pick out, all you need is a pound of ground beef and get 4 cups of that rice, brown rice, for $2. That's going to be a low glycemic index food. Ideally, you're doing something to work out. You're making 1,000-calorie meals. Pound of ground beef's only going to last you for 2 meals, but that's $10 for 2 meals. And you don't have to buy that rice every single time. So it's like $4 or $5 a meal. That's how I would definitely do it if I was in that situation. Little side tangent, but I would argue that a lot of people who say that they're poor, that they can't afford a healthy lifestyle, should really do the math and find out that eating out really isn't the cure. You look at something like Chipotle. Chipotle only gives you 4 ounces of meat. That is a quarter cup of ground beef, or a quarter pound, my bad. So that's $2 of ground beef. That's $2 of calories worth of meat. And then the rest of that is just rice and veggies. So a bowl at Chipotle is $8. You might think that's a good deal. You can actually make it for about half that price at home. So if you're poor, it's definitely an option for you to be healthy. Unless you're deeply poor. If you're making your own meals no matter what and you're not eating out at all, definitely do what you can to survive. I feel for you. It's not a good situation to be in, but you got to do what you got to do sometimes. But if you're 13 playing Fortnite and carefree, chances are you have more access to abundance than you think. Maybe that's selfish of me to say, but I don't think so. I definitely think if you're eating out a lot, there's other better options that you can do. So try to avoid those carbs and definitely start working out. I'm going to make a video on how to start working out, so I'll link that up here. I appreciate you guys for trying to learn about your health. Make sure you're treating your body as a temple, as the Bible commands. That's really important. And I think you're trying to do that by watching this video. So that's an awesome step for you guys. Some actionable steps: just avoid high fructose corn syrup at all costs. Try to avoid the table sugar. That really should get you right as long as you're eating natural carbs. If you watched all the way to the end and you like the content, you could leave a comment. That would boost the algorithm, make me get more views. Be great for me. Thanks for watching.